is objectionable, but it is very necessary. Clodagh Cochrane has written a book called Take Care, Preventing Child Sexual Abuse, a handbook for parents, in which she says that it occurs all too frequently, child sexual abuse. It's estimated that 1 in 10 children are sexually abused at some time or another, and 95% of those children are abused by somebody they know, they love, and they trust. I was talking to three separate women this week, knowing that this subject was coming up on the show, and all three told me that they didn't know any woman of their acquaintance who had not been sexually abused at some stage when they were young, which I thought was a wild exaggeration and very, very surprising indeed, whether you agree or not. But certainly the incidence of it is on the increase. Clodagh, I know your work is designed to stop sexual abuse of children, and you give many helpful hints and indications of symptoms and so on. How do you get over the problem of children lying about this, since children lie at times about most things?
Well, they do, but small children would be unable to lie about an experience such as sexual abuse. They would be unable to lie about something like oral sex or masturbation, children of 2 and 3 years old, unless they had experienced it. It's not within their cognitive ability. It's not within their understanding to think up that, to lie about it. An older child of 7 or 8 has no vested interest whatever in lying about, say, their father, upon whom they depend. He is their father or their brother or their teacher or the man next door. They have no vested interest in lying about those people. Yes, they do lie about cats and dogs and their everyday experiences, but an experience such as this, there is no reason for a child to lie. And in fact, the studies have shown with survivors that as children, they lied about not being sexually abused, because when they said or tried to indicate that something was unpleasant, like this was happening to them, the reaction of the people that they told was such that they immediately said, "Oh no, we're only joking."
Backed off.
Yeah.
And are those people you mentioned, are they the main abusers? That precise list that you've just said? Fathers, man next door, friends, uncles?
Yes, 50% of sexual abuse, about 50%, takes place within the home, either by a father or an older brother. And the age gap has to be around the 5 years between the victim and the victimizer. That's the least age gap there is. Years ago, we used to say that sibling abuse was not, in fact, I remember you saying this yourself in 84, sibling abuse was not, in fact, serious. And with swift rapidity, many people in the city came forward to advise me that sibling abuse was indeed extremely serious. And in this country, there was a particular problem with it because we have such large families that it's a particular problem between a much older brother and a very young sister.
Now, your definition of sexual abuse is very wide.
Yes, it is.
What are the sort of things we're talking about?
If you talk about incest, you're specifically referring to the penetration of a vagina by a male penis, which does not, in fact, constitute the experience of the vast majority of children. So if you broaden it out and you say from something like flashing, which can be quite traumatic. I mean, I was flashed at, but it didn't traumatize me, but I can tell you exactly where it happened and how I reacted, but it didn't actually traumatize me. But I do know people that it did, and that was the only experience they had of that. It can go from that to quite violent rape, and the range through that is being asked to masturbate an abuser, being asked to undress in front of an abuser, being forced to be bathed by an abuser, right up to
fondling,
touching the breast,
yes,
and kissing. Kissing is a very common form of sexual abuse, where the tongue is inserted into the mouth, and this is a dreadful experience for a small child, where they've always experienced kissing and hugging as loving. Gives a hug, Mum.
Yes. Now, is all this talk on television and indeed in your book and what we're doing now, is this not giving children the language with which they might lie?
Well, we're not talking to the children. I am addressing very
Parents,
specifically
yes,
the parents. And what I am saying is, you don't actually have to talk to your child and use the word sexual abuse. An informed child is a safe child. You're teaching your children to stay safe. You're not placing the burden of responsibility on them to keep themselves from being sexually abused, but you're informing them that there are certain things that they can do if they ever get worried, that they have permission to come and talk to you if they get worried. And it mightn't be sexual abuse, it might be bullying in the playground. But unless you inform them that you're there to listen, they may never feel able to tell you.
And Clodagh, do mothers, generally speaking, know or not that it's going on?
No. It has been my experience that the vast majority of mothers do not know. Now, certainly some mothers do know, but their own experience within their marriage is such that they are unable to disclose that because they may be battered, they may be themselves being sexually abused by their husbands.
But they may simply deny it.
They may deny it to the child. It is a very difficult thing if somebody tells you that, or if you walk in and see your husband in bed with your son or your daughter, you may say, oh, well, they're just having a cuddle. You just don't want to take on board what is actually happening. But there's the other point that a lot of the victims and the survivors that I have spoken with have said, but I told my mother, she knew. And when you look at that closer and you talk about it, they say, well, I told her I didn't want that babysitter. And I told her I didn't want to go messages for Mr. Brown. And they, as a child, think that inherent in telling that, they are telling the mother something.
That is explaining.
Yes, there's a huge communications gap there. And the mother, right, well, we'll change the babysitter. Or but you can go to bed before the babysitter comes then. Who would actually stop and think, why don't you like them? What's the babysitter doing that you don't like?
Mind you, having read your book, Clodagh, I almost began to feel guilty hugging my two daughters and kissing them good night.
Yes.
And in that way, it's very strong.
It is.
Almost gives you a feeling of guilt straight away.
I think that feeling, anybody coming to this subject new, goes through a period of, oh God, what will happen if somebody sees my daughter sitting on my knee? Will they talk? That's a problem within you. It is not a problem for the child. And I think that as you grow more comfortable with the subject and you're more informed by it, you will learn to overcome that. And you'd simply go back to your old habits of a good cuddle and a kiss and a...
All right, you want me to take a call, Ronnie? Line 4, is it? Okay, we'll take a line. Hello, line 4.
Hello?
Good evening.
Yes, Jack is my name. Listen, I want to make a point to the lady speaking there. And my point is this, that she's just simply spoke about that if people who don't know or not aware of sexual abuse against children would think, listening to that lady, that only men commit these offences.
So far.
Now, up to now, I thought she wasn't going to mention anything else, but it seems to me that she thinks that only men commit these offences. She spoke specifically about men. But, like, I know that women also commit these offences against both girls and boys' children.
Fair point. Well, I guess you beat us by about 5 seconds or so because I was going to come. Yes.
Can I ask you how you know this?
I beg your pardon?
Can I ask you how you know this?
Well, I know this from cases I've read, cases I've overheard in courts.
You've been in court with...
No, I've overheard them. I haven't got a personal experience. I've heard cases in court on an occasion, and I've also read of cases.
Yes, that's why I say that the vast majority of abusers are men. I have only ever met one adult who had been abused by her mother. I imagine that as time goes on and the subject becomes less taboo, we will find that there is an increasing number of children and young adults coming forward, both boys and girls, saying that they have been abused. I did speak to, and I knew quite well, a young man who said after we'd been talking about this subject for a long time, he said, well, one of the worst experiences of my life was my mother insisting on washing me, this is when he was 13 or 14, in the bath every single day. She would not allow me to wash myself. And it has lived with me all my life. And I dislike women because of it. And there is a sense in which he was being sexually abused, yes.
Yes. Thanks, caller, for that. A good point. Now, Constance Nightingale over here is a psychotherapist, and she herself is a survivor of sexual abuse as a child, and she's in Dublin to organise a seminar on this topic, which will be held in Ballinter in Our Lady of Sion in Navan from the 5th of February. What was the nature of your abuse, Constance? What happened to you?
Well, I was sexually abused by my father. I don't remember all the incidents that happened, but my first memory is at 3 years old when I was forced to have oral sex.
And afterwards, you forgot about this for a long time.
Yes, I did for most of my life until 5 years ago.
And what brought it back, Constance?
Well, it was about 2 days before my mother died, and my father had been dead for a long time. And I was looking at some of my sister's writing. We both write, and we read each other's material. And the writing that she was doing was her description of her sexual abuse by my father. And I found myself saying, oh my God, it happened to her as well, happened to her as well. And then I heard myself and finished the sentence. It happened to her as well as me. And there was a kind of intellectual realization before I remembered. And but everything about my life made sense for me, because I never could make sense about why so many awful things happened to me, you know. And I understand now that I was trained very early as a victim.
Trained as a victim?
Yes, I think the word is trained.
Explain that to me.
When you're too young to have any choice at all in that matter, and you're made repeatedly to be a victim, you learn ways of behaving that make you a victim. And of course, not remembering for so long because it was too painful meant that I had no knowledge of what was wrong, so therefore I couldn't even begin to put it right, you know. But I have now. I have now.
Well, I'll come back to you in a moment, Constance, to follow up on that, because I want to introduce Rosemary Troy. I want you all to join in. Anybody who wants in the audience to get involved in this, please do. Rosemary Troy is a psychologist, and she's moving from her job in communications training with the Rehab Institute to work as coordinator of Childline, which is being established by the ISPCC in late February. And Childline is along the same lines as the Esther Ranson Childline in England, which is set up. It would be a 24-hour service, Rosemary, which children can call a number and talk to somebody about their problems. Now, is counselling by telephone effective? I know it is. Samaritans do a splendid job for adults and so on, but with children, how can it work?
Yes, I believe it is. The thing is that with children, what they need more than anything else is a listening service, and that is the type of counselling that we will provide. They need to be listened to. They need to talk to an adult, to share their experience with somebody who will believe them. The believing is the very important factor here. And they can eventually build up a relationship of trust. Now, the UK experience would seem to show that a child will ring continuously if they have a problem until there is a resolution. And they will build up a trusting relationship with their counsellor. Now, when the child rings at first, in a position of being abused, for instance, you find that their trust in adults is at an all-time low. And building up that trust is a very important aspect of counselling. So, yes, I would say it is possible to do it. There is a very specific training required, and we're doing that at the moment. We have counsellors in training.
But your arrangement is that you would not take any action unless the child requests action to be taken.
That's right.
Which seems to me to be a dodgy one in that at what stage do you think a child asks for action to be taken, since Clodagh has said they back off when you threaten action because it's their father or their uncle or their brother or their mother or sister or whatever?
That's right. Well, there again, we don't know what's going to happen here. I mean, I should emphasise that the UK experience with Childline is that there are 30% of their calls concern sexual abuse. I mean, there are another 70% on other aspects of, problems,
yes, problems, yes.
exam stress, or various problems. 80 to 90%, I think, is the figure. Paul can confirm this. Of children ringing the helpline don't actually reveal their names at all. They remain totally anonymous. Now, I think this in itself is an expression of the need the child feels. Sometimes, with certain levels of abuse, the child's name may be the only personal possession that they feel is left to them. And guarding the name, guarding that level of privacy is very important to the child. The point is really that the child directs the proceedings. The child feels it's an enabling process. And that is what I liked very much about Clodagh's book, in that it stressed the autonomy of the child, giving power to the child, taking away the helpless syndrome, which can be so detrimental. The child can build up a trusting relationship, can eventually come to us for counselling. We hope at the end of the year perhaps to have we hope by the end of this year to have a counselling service, a multidisciplinary service where people can come, children can come and have help.
Yes. You are all mothers. You have all that. You have that in common as well.
That's right.
Rosemary Clodagh said the child is believed, and that's a great help.
Yes.
Is this a common occurrence that the child is not believed?
Oh, absolutely.
The
child is often not believed because the person hasn't heard what the child is saying. Yes. So the child is not. It's not so much that they're not believed as that they're not heard. Could I just go back to something that Rosemary said there? One of the reasons that children are victimised throughout their lives is because they are without power. And they are without power because of the way we rear them. You rear them right, therefore you have to rear them without power. Or that is the current thinking on child rearing. So that when a child picks up a phone and phones you, it is the first taste of power they have. And they can put that phone down the moment you get pushy as a counsellor and say, I think you should tell me your name and I will get you help. And believe me, the help available is not help in the child's eyes. So that they can put the phone down, and that's how they are using their power. And for the first time, the child actually experiences control of the problem, that they're getting on top of it.
Okay. Yeah. Hello. Hi.
Okay, I would have some serious questions about this counselling service. I mean, what Rosemary just said is we don't know what's going to happen, and she also said there will be a counselling service by the end of the year. What happens in the meantime? To all these children that will supposedly ring. I'm quite scared of that, because I mean, if a child continues to ring looking for help, and you cannot support by saying we can do something definite, yes, to follow through. Well, then the child is going to be worse off.
No, not really.
No,
follow at all.
No, I certainly don't agree that the child would be worse off. There are, as I said before, between 80 and 90% of the callers to UK Childline don't actually give their names at all. So we're talking about a very small percentage who would be coming in requiring help as such. Now, we do have, thankfully at the moment, we have the position where services are increasing, the resources are improving. We're having the Temple Street and Crumlin hospitals are opening special centres. And I have no doubt that they will be able to cope with I think it's a maximum of 3% we would expect to end up as referrals to another agency. But when I say that we don't know what will happen, I'm saying that we don't know exactly what will happen in the context of this country. We can't, because the service hasn't been implemented yet.
Yes.
However, we know what happened in the UK. And I'm quoting their experience. I've no reason to believe we will be vastly different.
Can I hold you there for the moment? And there's a call on line one. Would you hold on line one, please? Because I want to get into a commercial break here. I'll give another 15 minutes or so to this topic when we come back. So join us after this break, please. We take a break here. Thank you.
I'm 41 years of age, and from the age of 5 until I was 13 years of age, I was sexually abused by my father. With the circumstance, I became pregnant. I'm 18 years married now, and I have never shared this with my husband. I am full of shame, full of guilt, and it also turned me into an alcoholic. I would like to ask the lady, what would she advise me to do? It's something I could never talk about.
Can I just say, first of all, you're extremely courageous for phoning in here tonight. And I think now that you have told somebody, you can get some help for yourself and start to rebuild your life, and very quickly. I don't know what part of the country you are in, but if you are anywhere near a rape crisis centre, within any sort of calling distance of a rape crisis centre, I just encourage you to please ring them now for help. From there, that is your starting point right now. Are you anywhere near a rape crisis centre?
I'm living in Dublin. Dublin 24.
Well, you have help on hand right away tonight to help you over tonight and over the next few weeks, because you will find it very traumatic from here on in, now that you have admitted to yourself that this has happened, and they will help you rebuild your life. Is that any help to you?
It is.
I believe what you've told me. I think you're fantastic to have taken the phone up, and I'm pleased you have. And I just say to you, there is help at the end of this telephone. As soon as you put the phone down, please ring the Rape Crisis Centre. We will give you the number. If you give me the book,
here. It's in
I
the
will
back
give
of
you
the
the
book.
number.
Hold on just half a
The Dublin Rape Crisis Centre.
All the various agencies are listed here. And sorry for taking so long. Rape Crisis Centre is Dublin, 614-911. 614-911. All the various agencies are listed by Clodagh in her book. 614-911. Thank you, caller, for
Thank you very
coming
much,
out to us.
Jane.
All
Good
right,
luck
evening
with
to
it.
Good
Thank
luck to
you.
you. Indeed.
Our thoughts are with you, wherever you are.
Before we go any further, I want to come back to Constance. Constance Nightingale had a film made about her life and times, which is called The Nightingale Roars, an incest survivor's journey to freedom. This is an upsetting piece of film. I want to warn you, if this sort of thing upsets you, then please switch off. And this film followed Constance on her visit back to where she lived, and ended up in one part where she visits her father's grave. This is Constance Lambert here, where she visits her father's grave 26 years later. And this film will probably be shown by RTE later on. It certainly has been bought by one or two of the other networks. Will you roll it there, Roisin, please? This is Constance Nightingale, standing beside her father's grave on a revisit.
He died 26 years ago. 26 years. And we all laughed when we heard. Right, well, I'm going to say a few things to you, Dad. I've come here to say goodbye to you. But before I say goodbye, I want to tell you some things. I want you to know that what you did absolutely screwed up my life. And my children's. But they're all right now. And I'm all right now. No thanks to you. And I don't actually give a shit what reason there was. Not right now. Just had no right. No right. And I didn't deserve it. And you're a fucker. If you weren't fucking dead, I'd fucking kill you! You bastard! Every time I think about you, I fucking want to kill you!
Do you hear me?
Was it better to do something like that, Constance? Did that help in any way?
Well, let's put it in context. That journey was made following 2 years of intensive therapy. And I was fortunate because I am a psychotherapist and very used to expressing my feelings in any case. So that I would absolutely say to anyone watching that that is not something that you should do except you've been through some counselling and you are accompanied by someone who is trained to assist you. I did it because I know that that is a way to get out of my heart, if you want, the negative feelings that have really screwed up my life for so long. And I think it's a very good way, because once you've got rid of it, it's no longer there and controlling you.
At the very least, it's letting off steam anyway. It's
more than that.
It's more than that. I know it's more than that. Oh, I know it's much more than that. But however, sorry for keeping you so long. Up at the back, the young lady up at the back in the cream blouse.
Just coming back to the points in relation to the proposed childline service, and also the point you made about children, whether they will open up on the phone and the difficulty in trusting adults. I mean, obviously all people who are working in the area and everybody, I think, in the country wants to stop child abuse, and obviously they want to remove the pain that the children are suffering. But I think we have to look very carefully at what's the most effective way of doing that. And children who are abused can find it very, very difficult to trust an adult, particularly if that adult is somebody at the other end of a phone. And what I would wish that instead of setting up another service at this stage, that we would actually put our resources into the existing services we have, like the teachers, like youth club leaders, who are meeting kids every day so that the children have a chance to build up a trusting relationship with them, and that therefore they can then tell the teacher or the youth club leader or whoever what's happening, and that the teachers and the other people will be trained to know how to respond to that and how to lead the child on to help. Because obviously what we want is that the abuse would stop.
What's your reaction to all of that, Clodagh?
There are children in this world who will never, ever disclose to another adult on a one-to-one basis. They may not like their teacher, they may not be a trained counsellor in the school. What the reality of this situation is that the situation, if you're being abused, is very bleak indeed. And if we have to wait for the kind of utopia that you are describing there, there's going to be generations of children who continue to be abused without the ability or anybody allowing them to tell anybody.
Rosemary.
It appears to be that the very anonymity of the telephone communication does enable children to open up and to develop that trusting relationship. That is the experience, not just in Childline UK, but in childlines which have been established in New Zealand, the United States, Canada, the Kindertelephone in Holland. This is not a new idea that we have. We would like to claim originality, but I'm afraid it isn't. But at the same time, I sympathise totally with what the lady has just said. I agree that the services do need to be improved, that those resources do need to be developed. And I would have total sympathy with that. And I would say that let all of us who are in this area, who are in the business of caring for children, that is one thing that we all have in common. And let us all get together and let us lobby for this type of improvement. Let's not argue.
In the meantime, next month you're setting up this just child.
Oh, yes.
In the meantime.
And I believe that it will help a vast number of children.
Okay, line 3. Yes, hello, line 3.
I had one question for the lady on the panel. I believe she's correct in what she's saying about child abuse, and I believe perhaps it's been going on for many years and just been brought more to the forefront now. But I'm wondering, does she have any idea on what sort of therapy, how can we help the abusers? Because clearly I think we've got to try and prevent it rather than just have children phoning in. I don't think that in itself clears the problem.
Yes, I was just about to say, is there anything to be said for the abusers? They're obviously people who very badly need help.
Yes.
Could I answer?
Yes, yes.
Certainly, abusers have committed a crime. I think we must be really clear about that. That having been said, it isn't helpful simply to put them in prisons and do nothing else. In England, and I expect here, they mostly ask for solitary because they are going to be attacked by other prisoners, sometimes very grievously. Personally, I do work with abusers and find that I have not yet met an abuser who was not himself or herself abused sexually as a child, or alternatively has no memory of childhood, which is a primary indicator that child sexual abuse has happened. And it is very important that the abuser confesses. When an abuser comes to me, he goes through a process of confessing not only the thing that he may or may not have been caught for, but every single thing that he has ever done to a child. And then there is a process of asking for forgiveness, and then, which is much, much harder in my experience, the process of self-forgiveness, which I think we all find hard.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you, caller, for that. Gentleman down here in the front row, wanted to get in. Yes.
Yes, my name is Paul Griffiths, and I was actually the first director of the English Childline, or the UK Childline, so I'm very pleased to be here.
Yes.
I think one of the things, just addressing this issue of social services and their responses to children, in the UK, much the same thing happened. Social services were very worried that we were actually going to swamp them with thousands of children that they really couldn't cope with. Now, on one level, are social services really saying, and I've worked for social services too in the UK for many years, are social services really saying they would prefer children to carry on being abused in their own home, rather than at least have a child line, someone at the end of a telephone line to talk to as a first step? Now, what we found with our UK Childline was, just as Rosemary has said, that as they built up a very tentative relationship, step by step by step, with the counsellor on the telephone, they were then able to say, well, my name is now Mary. Sometimes it took 30 hours
and they would always
get to that point.
They would always talk to the same counsellor by name, would they?
We would try and always arrange to have the same counsellor there, so the relationship could be established in that way. And on that basis, we were able to find someone in that child's own area. Once the fear of disclosing who they were had been got over, we were able to find someone who could then talk to the child. Now, that's the best way to talk towards getting disclosures from children, getting some proper help, face-to-face help for them. But it's a long, long step. There are many, many children
you wanted
living in this
You wanted to get in
world.
again. You're obviously a social worker. Yes, you are a social worker. So
Byrne is my name, and I'm a social worker.
Yes, you have vested interest.
Yes, just to say, I mean, I think we have a very valid point in saying that we don't want to be swamped. I mean, the services already are, finding it hard to cope. Most of the resources at community care level which deal with child sexual abuse and physical abuse are used in those particular areas. We cannot get involved in anything else because of child sexual abuse. And we are afraid that this service is going to claim to offer something and it just can't be delivered on. That is a serious concern.
Okay, have you an answer to that, Rosemary?
I would say that it is not sufficient reason not to implement a service because we don't have the resources available. If we don't have them, why don't we have them? And let's do something about it.
That is true, but you see, as always in Ireland, we go for an ideal, and while we're waiting for the ideal, as Clodagh says, the utopia, that is no reason to do nothing. And this thing is starting next month, and it seems to me that it's reasonable to get it off the ground and operating now, rather than wait for some distant time in the future.
The old story of it's better to light a candle than forever curse the darkness.
Yes.
Could I just say in relation to the last caller you had, that yes, of course, offenders must be dealt with and they must have treatment, and it is incarceration for such offences isn't sufficient on its own. You must have the therapy to go with it. I, however, feel very strongly that prevention, as ever, to use another cliche, is better than cure. And I would like to see a total revamping of the school curriculum and parenting skills getting a very high priority, because at the moment I think the position in schools in terms of education, if we take that as meaning training for adulthood, I think it's just laughable.
Okay, line 6 I'll take. Hello, line 6.
Hello?
Yes, line 6.
I was brought up in Mayo. I was assaulted when I was 12 years old.
Could you say that again? Oh, sorry. Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
As well as being assaulted, the lad tried to castrate me. He was about 90% successful. Now I've grown up to being well over 6 feet tall now. And for 20 years I have tried to chase that guy. I've chased him all over England, I've chased him all over Ireland. And the day I'll get him, I'll kill him. And I can never get rid of that hate. And can you actually understand what hate can build up? It's cost me 2 marriages. It's cost me that my daughter hardly knows me. And can you understand? A lot of people talk and they say they're doing good at it. But I don't think there's anyone can ever get the hate. They can grow up or the fear of people after that.
I do understand.
Yes.
I do understand that hate very much indeed. And I really wish I could talk to you, because there really are ways that you can be assisted to get rid of the rage. And there is no word for that rage. I know it very well. I don't know what have you in Dublin for male survivors.
Yes. Are you still there, caller? Yes. You are. Phone us after the show.
Yes.
Will you do that?
Yes.
Will you do that, please? All right, then we'll talk to you after the show, Constance and Clodagh and
we can
Rosemary.
get you help at that time. If you will call in or leave your name now and telephone number, we will call you back and get you help very quickly.
Will you leave it with whoever you're talking to upstairs, Mary or Bridget? Thank you. Yes, gentlemen, did you have your hand up there? You didn't, or the lady in red? Sorry, you. Yeah, pull over. Yeah.
All I'm thinking of, I agree with what the ladies are saying in as far as that everything is fine. But how do you tell a young child in as far as a phone number when a lot of them, don't understand numbers?
Well,
if they're that young.
How young are you talking about?
Yes.
Well, even up to 6 years of age. I mean, they're only starting school. They're only learning numbers. And how can you tell them that there's a number there for them to be helped if they're being, if you like, let it be sexually abused?
6-year-olds can use the telephone.
6-year-olds and 2-year-olds can use the telephone, and we'll tell you their telephone number. And we'll be quite happy to answer your phone in your house for you.
Telecom Éireann are being very helpful and very supportive to us in this matter at the moment, and they are in fact giving us a number which will be very easy to remember. I don't know as yet what the number will be, but they are giving us a mnemonic number, and it will be engraved. We are proposing an advertising campaign, and this number will be engraved in their minds.
You will, of course, get a great number of nuisance calls, of course. And rubbish and so on. But however, the lady in red, yes, you had your hand up.
Yeah. To ask Constance, did she ever confront her father whilst he was alive?
No,
Why
I
not?
didn't. I only remembered 5 years ago, and he had been dead then for many, many years.
Was it one instance, or was it a succession of incidents?
It was a succession of incidents, and there was also another friend of the family, a priest, who assaulted me too from the age of 12. And I didn't tell anybody about that either.
I would like to know their answer face to face before they went that far.
I think that I would get them to say sorry now. That's what I would ask them.
It'd be interesting to hear what answer they would give you.
They have no answer, actually. There is no answer to that accusation,
There is no answer.
Most of them deny that anything has been done, but usually when the victim herself or himself confronts the abuser, in my experience anyway, 90% break down and say they are sorry. And it's the beginning of their healing when they admit it.
Line 1, we'll take line 1. Yes, line 1.
Good evening, Gay.
Good evening.
May I ask the lady how she has, so she seems to have a very clear memory to remember from the age of 3. Could I ask her how she remembers so clearly?
That occurred to me too. From the age of 3, Constance. How can you remember so clearly from the age of 3?
Well, I mean, I know people who can remember earlier than that. I don't know what the average is, but I had a clear memory of being in my cot and wakening to my father being there and what happened afterwards.
Do you doubt that, caller?
Very much, I doubt it, yes.
Why
I just
so?
find it very hard to believe, that's all.
What's your first memory?
Well, I mean, memories like that, to remember things like that seems very, it doesn't make sense. I can't understand how you could remember back that far so clearly.
How far back can you remember clearly?
I wouldn't remember back that far. I wouldn't remember back to incidents quite so specifically to know actually what was happening, if you know what I mean.
Do you know, it occurs to me that if people cannot believe me, and I'm 52, I wonder how many people are not going to believe children.
Yes, Rosemary. Thanks, caller.
Okay.
I would suggest that most people remember their first day at school. It seems to be one of those occasions that's engraved in people's memory. And most of us started school when we were 4 years old. So I think that if something like that, because it can be, I suppose, a traumatic experience or certainly a very deep experience, and if something like that can be remembered for that reason, then I think sexual abuse will certainly be engraved from that time.
As a mother of 5, Rosemary, you have no reservations about... On the one hand, Clodagh is quite right. Her book is about a handbook for parents, and being warned is a safety valve in itself. You've no concerns about a lot of publicity being given to this subject, and a lot of children hearing about it for the first time, and a lot of people cluing in that way. Have you reservations about that as a mother at all?
I don't have any reservations about it. Do you mean that maybe we would get what we're calling the nuisance
yes,
calls?
I think you'd get a lot of that, and children's imagination going wild and all of that. I'm just putting the standard objections to you now.
I'm sure initially we will get nuisance calls, but the thing is with nuisance calls that one day a child making what we would call a nuisance call could be in real need, might need the service. So we will treat that call with the same respect as we would. I think that would be the same position the Samaritans adopt. And they're a body of people I have tremendous admiration.
It's worth suffering a few nuisance calls in order to get the
I think so. We're prepared to take them on board.
Yes. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for coming along. This is Clodagh Cochrane, Constance Nightingale and Rosemary Troy. The book is called Take Care, Preventing Child Sexual Abuse, a handbook for parents, and you'll see it in all the bookshops. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Come back to us after the break, please. Now, does anyone want to go home?